Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for tuning in today. My name is Sarah Cornish, and I'm Project Director at Games for Change. We're so pleased to welcome you to our fourth Games for Change Industry Circle Google Hangout, and today we're with GlassLab Games. We'll be talking to Paula Escuadra, Head of Content Partnerships at GlassLab, as well as Design Director Erin Hoffman-John, and learning about how they built the GlassLab Analytics Engine. After we hear from Paula and Erin, we'll have an audience Q&A, and that's where you guys come in. You can submit questions via the Google Hangout Q&A button, which is on the left of your screen, or on Twitter using the hashtag G4C Industry. We've included a couple of links in the Showcase app that's part of this Google Hangout platform, and you can open that by clicking the yellow tag icon on the left of your screen. So to give a quick background to the Industry Circle, it's a group hosted by Games for Change, and the Industry Circle aims to acknowledge the achievements and challenges in the growing social impact games sector. We're recognizing some of the companies and entrepreneurs emerging as industry leaders and believe that identifying and sharing best practices and lessons learned can inspire and invite others to forge new paths in this growing sector. The Industry Circle includes Cognito, Amplify, BrainPop, the Global Gaming Initiative, GlassLab, Filament Games, and Shell Games. And as a brief introduction to GlassLab Games, and then I'll let Paula and Erin take it away to go deeper into some of their tools and processes. GlassLab creates and enables commercial quality, high-impact digital learning games for young people in and out of the classroom. Their games are aligned to Common Core standards and 21st century skills, and they're implemented in hundreds and hundreds of schools and homes across the country. GlassLab develops frameworks for best practices using evidence-centered game design and supports developers with technology and professional services to help them do the same. We're so glad they can be part of our Games for Change Industry Circle Google Hangout series as true trailblazers in game-based learning and assessment. So I will hand it over to Paula to talk a little bit more about what GlassLab is up to, and to Erin as well. And then we will follow with a Q&A from the audience after their presentation. So thank you, and here is Paula.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks to everybody tuning in, as well as for the reschedule. It really means a lot to us to be able to share our work and try to find and identify more ways in which we can help the industry. Let me share my screen really quick. So we started out with GlassLab Games serving as the ultimate destination for high-impact learning games with proven learning outcomes. And the reason why is because we were trying to find a way to lower the barriers to entry for game developers, as well as the barriers to adoption for educators. We're trying to find we were trying to identify ways in which we could make things accessible, especially since a lot of the learning games market right now is really difficult to navigate. And oftentimes, it's really hard to discern games that have high learning value as well as are really engaging in a way that kids will want to play them in and out of school. We also wanted to make the games relevant to what we needed in the 21st century world. So the games that come onto GlassLab Games cover more than just cognitive skills, and they serve to address the process and conceptual understanding that we really need for academic and career success. And a lot of curriculum that is covered sometimes doesn't exactly stick in the best way, especially since a lot of students learn in different ways. And so games are a way to kind of bridge that gap and create engagement and create opportunities for learning progression. We also wanted to make it very usable in a way that maybe game developers who are really comfortable with Steam or users who are comfortable with, say, the Amazon Marketplace, trying to find a way to make the user experience very simple, requiring little to no professional development to really ramp up and use. And each of the games come with lesson plans, tutorials, and real-time reports that really make that visible. And one of the ways in which we really tried to do this is to make everything really easy to use and have everything really be really innovative, but at the same time not require a lot of onboarding or time to get used to the product and really have an easy way to get it into the hands of kids. One of the key differentiators that we have on the platform is the classroom and user management system. So this is one of the tools that a lot of game developers, when we first went live with the platform, said it's something that has been a barrier to them to getting into the classroom because they have a game, they really want to use it, it covers a lot of skills, it covers a lot of Common Core standards, but there's not a way to help teachers use the products effectively. And so the classroom management system is a way for them to do that. Educators on the platform can give a class code of their choosing to their kids. There's an available set of seats, and they can restrict or enable access whenever it's convenient for them. When going into the student reports, which are the bread and butter of the platform, there are 4 main types of reports right now. So there's a game progress report that shows the student progress of the game, and a lot of the time one of the barriers has been just seeing where the kid is at, and a lot of the time educators who implement games have to go to each and every single device and student to figure out where they're at and what they're doing. And so the game progress report enables a snapshot to see how they're doing in the game, if there are any in-game achievements, what have the kids achieved, and then find learning points of discussion where they could dive deeper into what they did and how they can improve or what they did really well. In terms of competency levels, one of the reasons why we implemented this report was because we wanted to get rid of the black box that dealt with how does, or answering the question of how gameplay mechanics can map to competency standards. And this is something that a lot of administrators will see as really useful, a lot of educators will see as really useful, because one of the things that we don't want to do is replace instruction. One of the only way in which we really provide added value is if we find ways to enhance the existing curriculum. And the competency reports enable a snapshot into that so that it's really easy to see at which point, say, if students are developing complex problem-solving skills, at which point they're doing really well, and what point are they progressing. And it also feeds into the shout-out and watch-out reports, which enable educators to identify in real time positive learning behaviors as well as opportunities for progress. So you'll see here for the SimCity EDU dashboard, taking into account, say, the 3 of the missions that are available, it'll show where the student is showing positive signs of learning progression. And then the shout-out, watch-out, on the watch-out report, it'll show maybe where they're getting stuck, or maybe they're just goofing around, or they're not sure where they're going. And the what now also provides added value in the sense that if students are doing really well, or if they're getting a little stuck, we provide discussion prompts that can enable the educator to share that experience and kind of drill down and see where the student's doing really well and have that discussion. So all of these key learnings that are available on the reports, we made it accessible through a gameplay dashboard, and it's something that educators will see the moment they log onto the site, and it's really just to make it a lot easier for educators to see exactly what they want to see, and give a snapshot glance into what their students are doing. So right now we have key game stats, like average total time played, what the average game progress is, which is really useful, especially once you get into mission-based games, and to have the most recent shout-out and watch-out reports, as well as be able to filter by classroom so that it's a lot easier for them to get to the information they're really looking for. This is an example of how we've kind of progressed the way in which we visualize this information, and we're continuing to learn a lot of things about how educators read and understand reports, and how game developers can also surface their learning information in a more effective way. And it's been really difficult to do that, but the way in which we've been able to do this is through iterative user testing. We're continuing to work with researchers and educators and students to really identify the way in which we can optimize this. So all of these learnings in terms of how we've progressed our own understanding of game development and how it's extended to how we can visualize the learning is shown in the GlassLab Game Design Handbook, which Erin Hoffman-John has written along with other members of our game team. And a lot of our learnings in terms of figuring out ways to not only design the games, but get it into the market through GlassLab Games and through other means as well. And I highly recommend showing it or checking it out. So in terms of capturing data in a meaningful and effective way, we've learned a lot. And it's very difficult to really distill down this information because event stream data is really, really intense. So in order to capture that meaningful information, we really need to continue to iterate on our understanding of how we're recording in the game, or recording information in the game. So to go over the relationship between game mechanics, data structures, and the reporting, I'll turn it over to Erin, our design director.
Sure. So I guess if we can keep on Paula's slides, since we're sort of sharing slides here. What we need to do when we take raw data from a game is to really filter it into something that's meaningful for teachers. So this comes out of our learning from SimCity EDU, where SimCity produces volumes of data, thousands of data points every second, literally a tremendous amount of data piping through. And so if we were to just direct that at a teacher, it would be impossible to understand what they needed to focus on at any given moment. So our data structures inside of GlassLab Games, which is a recent innovation from one of our learning scientists, basically codify that data into certain channels that we can universally process into meaningful information for teachers. So one of the ways that we do that begins with the game design process, and or with an existing game, identifying and analyzing what the core actions are inside of that experience. So this is the core loop from Mars Generation 1, where this was a game that was built for argumentation, and so we were able to create these core behaviors inside the game where players were searching an environment and finding evidence, and then taking that evidence and equipping it onto robots, and then battling those robots. So each of those game behaviors has a correlation. So you can see here how the player takes an action inside the game, and then we know that that particular behavior is correlated with certain skills in argumentation, so that when that game behavior is put into data through our system, we're filtering that and saying, okay, if they did this action in battle, it has this direct reflection on argumentation learning. And we can draw that conclusion in our analytics system, put it through into a report for a teacher, and say, here's the correlation, here's what's happening, here's where you might want to intercede. Because if in a battle, this is an argument battle, say that a player is having a particular trouble with an argument from authority and they're consistently using the wrong sort of critical question, we can pipe that through to a teacher and say, hey, this concept is not understood, and we know that because of this particular action that they're taking in the game, so here's the intervention that you might want to do. And then this chart was put together by one of our learning scientists at ETS, and shows the breakdown in the way that our core game behaviors on the bottom of explore, equip, and battle actually directly correlate to argumentation skill. So we start at a very high level of argumentation skill and say the important things in argumentation are to be able to identify evidence in the world, and then to be able to organize that evidence, to be able to use it contextually, and then to be able to evaluate other arguments for their validity. And so we can break each of those sort of high-level concepts down into these behaviors, such as matching data to a related argument, or arranging an argument with multiple pieces of data. These are the sub-behaviors that we would want to see one at a time from a student to know that they really understood how argumentation works. And then each of these sort of sub-behaviors and even high-level competency concepts correlate to things that are directly in the game. So you can kind of see this direct mapping from concept to game mechanic. And what our analytics system does is take the information from each of those behaviors and channels it through into a report. So one of the ways that we can map this onto all sorts of other games is by dividing games into game sessions and then into actions that are taken inside those sessions. So when we, for instance, take another game like Game Over Gopher and translate it into our GlassLab Games system, first we're dividing that game into its game sessions, figuring out what concepts each behavior in the game correlates to, and then allowing the developer to customize report information to say, when this action is taken with this game behavior, it applies to this competency. And then that piece of data is surfaced to a teacher in a particular moment when a student is performing that behavior, whether it's success or failure.
Cool, yeah, and just to piggyback off that, so as you can tell, it's really difficult to kind of distill down this really complex information in a way that is easily digestible and really actionable in the classroom. And this is especially being considerate of the fact that when educators are having to use these dashboards, even if a game is useful, even if it's really engaging for kids, at the end of the day, they have 30 minutes a session. And we have to figure out a way to really provide added value for them. So what we've learned when we're creating this modular system, we're trying to find more ways to visualize the reports. We're trying to create more data features that can serve as building blocks for different types of analysis. And it really depends on the stakeholder you're talking to. And a lot of the systems should be able to support the design of these games from scratch, or an existing third-party developer who's looking to get into the space. And this can be surfaced in iteration of this can be surfaced in different ways. For developers to really help them not only get into the learning game market, but also surface learning data in a really useful way, they need better reporting tools. For researchers, it's more granular learning analytics. For students, it's personalized visualization of these learning experiences, and for educators, it's more real-time instructional support. So along with these reports, a lot of conversations still need to happen, and we're getting better at creating reports and user experiences on the platform to decrease the dependency on that. But there's still a lot for us to learn. In terms of how we're taking the next step, we're using the GlassLab Analytics Engine to support the alignment of core learning design with the system-wide data structure and framework that Erin's been talking about. And we're continuing to iterate on the developer tools. So when we were working with our beta partners, which include BrainQuake, NMSU, UluLab, iCivics, we really wanted to work on essentially figuring out how quickly we could get these games onto the platform, and what our pain points are. And so when we were publishing these tools, we realized it takes a lot of time to have a dedicated data engineer put in the telemetry hooks one by one. And so the reports that we're hoping to come out with by the end of the year will be focused on enabling the developer to have more access to the system and make the dependencies on our team a little bit less, so that they can fix and optimize as soon as it suits them. So we have features like a game page editor that will make it so that they can change their game page, add new content, add new lesson plans and research. A report editor that will make it so that they can create their own reporting rules with guidance and support through our team, but really put the agency on them. And we're also looking to find more ways to optimize the reporting. So someday we're excited to come out with a custom report builder, so that beyond the competency report, beyond the shout out, watch out, if there are things that developers really want to surface through their game, they'll have the ability to do so. And we hope that with the publication of these tools, we'll be able to cut down the onboarding time, which was initially, upwards of 1 to 2 months, now down to possibly a week, depending on the resources of the developer. So that's something that we're really, really excited about. And yeah.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, too, that I think this whole process that we've been going through is this sort of massive world translation question, which is why even when we're talking to different audiences, we're using different language and different ways of describing what we're doing. But we've known for a long time that the meaningful data exists inside of games that's hugely relevant to learning. And it's taken, up until this point, teachers that were highly game literate in order to really pull that out. So what we're trying to do is flatten that curve, to kind of say, game developers, this is the language that you can speak in. Here's a formalized way of looking at your game that's conceptually oriented in the way that the behaviors in your game perform a particular kind of learning. And then our system takes that and makes this translation into what's relevant for teachers in the classroom, that then allows teachers that aren't necessarily quite so game literate to just look at a report and say, okay, I understand at a high level, when my students are playing, this is what's going on.
Great. Thank you. So are you ready for the Q&A?
Always.
Okay.
Yeah. So just for our viewers who are tuned in, thank you again. To make sure that you understand how the Q&A tools work on the Hangout, you look at the far left of your screen, there's a stack of icons. There's a little speech bubble that says Q&A. If you open up that, that'll allow you to enter in questions. So feel free to start entering your questions now or submitting them on Twitter using hashtag G4C Industry. So we're monitoring Twitter, and we'll enter in those questions here as well. So while we are waiting for your fantastic questions to start coming in, I'm going to bring up a question that was asked on Twitter this past week from user Zara Al-Yayi. And he asks, how can we measure the improvement of cognitive skills in games? And so I know, Paula and Erin, you already answered this on Twitter, but we'd appreciate if you could elaborate a little bit more here. Again, the question is, how can we measure the improvement of cognitive skills in games, and can the app be used as a measurement tool?
Sure, yeah. I definitely would recommend checking out the Shout Out, Watch Out reports alongside the competency reports, because it's really important, especially when you're thinking about game design, and Erin can probably provide more detail on this than I can, especially with our experiences from SimCity EDU to Mars Generation 1 and then Ratio Rancher, which have been very distinct learning experiences in terms of game development. But I would highly recommend using those and making sure that especially when you're drafting your messaging to educators and creating your instructional supports, you want to be sure that your gameplay mechanics map to the standard or map to the competency, and also enabling opportunities for educators to have a clear understanding of how that learning progression happens and where they may get stuck. But Erin may be able to provide more detail in terms of how to map those competencies.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would even roll it back to say this is where we get into some of those language issues where one person will use the phrase cognitive skill to mean one thing. Like it could mean persistence of memory. It could mean your ability to keep focused on something. It could be attentional. Or in the learning world or in the school world, cognitive skills could be distinguished from what they call non-cognitive skills. So that's that kind of split. So it really depends on what you mean by cognitive skills. I would say that what we mainly focus on are those skills that are valuable in school systems and in classrooms. So those are the competencies that Paul is talking about. If you were kind of talking about cognitive skills more broadly in terms of attention, we actually had another project where Valshut in Florida was studying Plants vs. Zombies for the way that it might be used to teach problem solving. And this is kind of a more advanced, a more abstract cognitive skill of can you solve a problem and all the different things that can mean and what are the components of being able to solve a problem. The net answer is yes, definitely. We've been able to track improvement in cognitive skills. We've been able to create reports that are related to them, and it just totally depends on what you're looking at. You can definitely measure it from behavior in a game, so long as that game is performing the behavior that you're trying to measure, which is kind of, it sounds obvious, but often a lot of games are not actually performing the behaviors that are correlated to the thing that you're trying to teach.
In case anyone is interested, I believe it's added on the resource page, but the report on Use Your Brains EDU, which is the educational version of Plants vs. Zombies 2, is available on our research page on the About site, as well as other studies on SimCity EDU, Mars Gen 1, as well as Ratio Rancher.
Yeah, and apparently there's a Wikia site.
Oh.
I just discovered. Yeah, if you Google Use Your Brains, BRAINZ, you can find a whole bunch of stuff about that project.
That's cool. Yeah, I mean, like another way too, in case, and this question can also feed into the validity of the learning impacts of these games. One of the ways in which we've helped address those is to work with existing institutions and organizations who have been deeply rooted in this space and have done a lot of research. And so in terms of Use Your Brains EDU, we compared it to, I believe, 2 separate already proven valid assessments for problem solving, and there was a positive correlation for that. When we were doing our field trial for Mars Generation 1 Argubot Academy, really long name, we compared it to the C-ball assessment, and there's also a positive correlation there. And so if you're looking for, I would say, like, if developers were looking for a way to help enhance the value proposition for their game or find ways in which they can improve their own game mechanics, I would highly recommend working with research firms, working with researchers and learning designers in order to help make that happen.
Well, thank you. That's great advice. Anything else? Okay. So a couple more questions. So curious about how you recommend getting buy-in from school administrators. And that's a big obstacle that a lot of games and learning developers face. And if you could talk a little bit about how you've worked with admins and kind of breaking down those barriers to getting games in the classroom.
Sure. I mean, a lot of the entry points into schools have come from teachers. So as Erin mentioned earlier, a lot of the early adopters who are already gamers themselves or are really interested in game-based learning or have used non-video game experiences, but like paper prototypes and things like that. Having the ability to have those discussions with those teachers and kind of figuring out, okay, here's what the specific school wants, here's where their gap is, be it in terms of what is going on in their curriculum or perhaps in class behavior or engagement with a really complex subject. A lot of administrators will not only look for standards alignment for the games, but also are there any user stories. So this is where play testing is really, really critical and has worked really well for us, because when we're developing the games, we're not only testing just like how the game works, whether or not something's broken, whether or not the reports are aligning to the gameplay mechanics, but also just how users are using the game, and having not only the quantitative evidence but the qualitative story, like how the students feel, how the educators feel it helped them. Did it lower barriers for discussion? Did it make it easier to move forward in a lesson? Things like that are pretty critical, and a lot of it is also very feel-good and very important, especially since with video games, like we talk about the black box, and it's really difficult to gauge what happens in the virtual space. But putting a human face to it is also really important, and that's something that, especially when be it from talking to an individual educator or talking doing a panel in a full room of IT admins or district level administrators, all of that the combination of such has been pretty critical.
Great. Thank you. So we have a question from Raj Kataria, who just submitted this. He's saying that you missed the first part of the session, but he likes the idea of the GlassLab Games Analytics Engine. Is it already available for the public? How do you access it, and what are kind of the I guess membership packages or pricing packages that you have? How does one access your tools?
Sure. So in terms of the educator access, it's available through a premium subscription for a year. Currently, the price is based off of the device environment of your choice, as well as the number of student and educator seats are. And the student price is capped at $5 currently, and it decreases, the larger the package gets. In terms of getting access to the GlassLab Analytics Engine, it is actually available through our doc site now, and there's a lot of documentation on it in case you're really interested in just getting started and figuring out how to integrate into the platform. It's available for viewing at docs.glasslabgames.org. But in terms of if you're interested in distribution, if you're interested in learning more about how to integrate into the reporting or get feedback on learning design and things like that, I highly recommend reaching out to either of us. And we're happy to schedule a call and do that walkthrough and figure out if it works.
Great, and we encourage everybody to check out the Showcase app too. If you're logged into this Google Hangout, it's the yellow tag icon stacked over on the left of your screen, and we've got that docs.glasslab.com link there, as well as a couple of other resources that would be helpful to look through. So and we will you can contact Paula and Erin both on Twitter, and we can post their contact information on the Google Hangout page as well, if that'd be helpful. So so again, feel free to submit questions via the Q&A app here or on Twitter #G4C Industry. Another question. So are there plans to create dashboards for students? If you could talk a little bit about kind of what the next steps are, if you're going to get more student focused or stay kind of focused on educators and assessment tools.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, right now there's currently a youth portal where students can put in their class code, see the games that they're currently enrolled at, and there's some high-level kind of like scorecard visualizations that show like here's a shout out that you got recently, or here's a watch out, and here's kind of a prompt to figure out how you can move forward or improve. One of the things that we really want to be able to do is really promote that agency and empowerment in the learner, and especially with games being so highly visual and highly interactive and highly engaging, we want to be sure that in the virtual space as well as when interacting with peers and community, we want every learner to feel like they're able to take control of their learning experience, especially since learning being a very complex ecosystem. We want to be sure that they're engaged in every step of the process. So figuring out a way to visualize that information, not just in the form of, say, achievement, but in terms of how they're progressing in their learning experiences is going to be pretty critical with us moving forward. Erin, do you have anything to add?
No, I think that's great. I think that this is something we're super interested in, and especially, like Paula was saying, data that empowers the learner is a big part of our core ideology. I would say that I think students are interested in their own data in certain contexts. So often, like, how do I stack up against the rest of the class? And we want teachers to be able to use that as a kind of tool. So to be able to say, okay, let's reflect back. Here's the choices you all are making inside the class, and what does that say about you? So students are often interested in the way that the choices that they make in a game tells them something about themselves. And so it's this sort of very rich space that we definitely want to delve further into. I think the other part of it is the way that gameplay becomes an artifact, or we're investigating ways that we can take what is done in a game and make it part of a portfolio piece that can be given back to a student and become part of their sort of learning scrapbook. This is all stuff that we definitely want to dig into in the next year.
Great. It's really interesting. Thank you. So in terms of the developers that are going to tune in and watch this hangout and watch the recorded version of it that's going up on YouTube afterwards, what are some kind of really important key takeaways for game developers, and how can they get involved in what your team is doing?
I mean, I would definitely say check out GlassLab Games and help join us, especially since in order for us to really create the change we want to see in the world, we have to be collaborative, we have to be engaged, and so this is really a collaborative effort for us to set the standard for game-based learning, and it also comes with a lot of learning opportunities. So we need your help to continue to progress how we design reports, continue to progress how we showcase the value of games to learners, to educators, to parents, administrators, mentors. It's a really huge movement that is occurring in the market, and it's something that needs all hands on deck. And so by working together, I feel like we could see a lot of progression in the space, and I'm really excited for it.
Thank you. And Erin, anything to add there?
Sure. I would say, like, talk to a teacher every week. It's I think probably not maybe for the Games for Change audience in particular, but I'm shocked how many developers like really want to make educational games, and I said, well, have you talked to a teacher? And they said, no, I haven't done that. I think it's really easy for us in the game development community to kind of feel like teaching is an ivory tower, we can't bother them, but the reality is that teachers love to talk about this kind of stuff, and especially if you talk to teachers and say, what's the hardest thing for you to teach, and then translate that into a game prompt, because often what's hard for teachers to teach is something that's very dynamic, which is really conducive to making a video game. So I think that the more we could get developers talking to teachers and oriented around trying to solve the problems that teachers are struggling to solve inside their classrooms, that's the way forward.
Thank you. Well, it looks like we don't have any final questions, so I guess closing words from you both, Paula and Erin, and then we'll close up.
Yeah, I thank you very much for enabling us to join the Hangout again. I would definitely just say thanks again, and very much invite developers and educators, because everybody is a game designer. Everybody has the ability to be an innovator in this space, and so I hope to hear from everybody.
Thank you. So thank you everyone so much for tuning in. This recording will be up on the Games for Change YouTube channel in a few moments after we end the broadcast here. So again, you can follow along on Twitter or submit additional questions at #G4C Industry. Thank you, and thank you so much to Erin and Paula at GlassLab Games. See you next time.
Thanks.